Thank you all so much for joining in again for our Setting the Trend Straight Functional Foods Fact Check webinar. My name is Emily, and I am one of your Stop and Shop Nutrition Partners registered dietitians. Here is just our brief disclosure note before we get started today. So please note that all of the information I'll be sharing is for educational purposes only and is not intended to replace any of the advice that you get from your own healthcare providers. Now, in case this is the first time you're joining in for one of our webinars before, welcome. And I'm happy to give a brief overview of our Nutrition Partners program here. So we are the team of registered dietitians here at Stop and Shop, and we provide a variety of free nutrition services to help you and your families eat well. We do this through our online classes. We're also available for one-on-one consultations, and we have some great handouts and videos on our website on a variety of different nutrition topics. So if you are curious to learn more, you can head to stopandshop.com/nutrition. Now let's look at our agenda for the afternoon. So we are first going to start off with an overview of functional foods. Then we'll take a close-up look of certain foods and food components. We'll touch on some research considerations, and I will end with Q&A. So as we go throughout the webinar or at the end of the webinar, please feel free to type in any of your questions into the chat box or the Q&A box, and I'm happy to answer those at the end. But please just avoid including any of your own personal health information in the chat box and stick to questions that are about general nutrition or food-related topics. So with that being said, let's jump into it. Now, functional foods has definitely been a trending buzzword within nutrition recently, and the topic only seems to be growing in popularity. And so with media headlines like the ones you see here on your screen, you might know that functional foods are trending, but you might be asking yourself, what exactly are they? So we're definitely going to dive a little bit deeper into that today. So let's start off with that question. What are functional foods? Now, there actually is no federal definition for functional foods, so different organizations may have different definitions. The Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics defines functional foods as whole foods along with fortified, enriched, or enhanced foods that have a potentially beneficial effect on our health when consumed as a part of a varied diet on a regular basis at effective levels based on scientific evidence. So that was a mouthful. So essentially, in simpler terms, we can think of functional foods as foods that have a beneficial effect on our health beyond just basic nutrition. So as you can imagine, with that general type of definition in mind, there are likely many foods that we may think of to be functional foods. So here are a couple different ways that we can think about functional foods, or some different categories out there. So the first way we could think about functional foods are as conventional foods. So these would be whole foods that naturally contain health-promoting components. An example of this would be the heart-healthy omega-3 fats that are naturally found in walnuts. Now, we can also think about functional foods as modified foods. And these would be foods that contain health-promoting components through enrichment or fortification, meaning the nutrient has been added to the food. And an example of this would be omega-3 enriched eggs. All right, now the FDA is responsible for making sure that foods that are sold in stores that you can buy in the US are labeled properly. Now, while the FDA doesn't provide a legal definition for the term functional foods, they do provide guidance and regulation around these foods and certain health claims that manufacturers may make. Now, depending on the nature of a health claim that a product is making, the FDA may or may not require a formal review before a manufacturer can make or use that claim. Now, claims that speak to how a food affects the normal structure of our body or how a food or a component may just support general well-being are not pre-approved by the FDA. So the strength of scientific evidence supporting those types of general claims may vary. And an example of that type of claim may be saying that a product generally helps support the immune system. Now, because there is no formal definition of functional foods, there also isn't an easy database that we could just go to online to help sort or find different foods to see if they're functional or not. So in a sense, we have to be detectives in a way if we want to know if foods are quote unquote functional. So with all of this in mind, let's take a close up look at a few different foods and food components to discuss if or what the current level of scientific evidence is to support its claim as being functional. All right, so first let's take a close-up look at soluble fiber. So fiber is the indigestible portion of plant foods, and soluble fiber is just one type of fiber, and it's naturally found in items such as fruits, vegetables, legumes, and whole grains. Now, there has been a lot of research on this food component, specifically with regards to heart health. And so current scientific research supports the notion that soluble fiber, as a part of an overall heart healthy eating pattern, may help lower cholesterol levels. And so with this in mind, we could then consider soluble fiber as a functional food component because it provides a beneficial effect on our health beyond just basic nutrition, and in this case, reducing the risk for heart disease. Now, as I mentioned a few moments ago, soluble fiber can be naturally found in plant-based foods like fruits, vegetables, legumes, and whole grains. And Cheerios is actually an example of a whole grain cereal that highlights this functional food component in its marketing. And because soluble fiber at this time has enough scientific evidence to support its link to reducing the risk of heart disease, the FDA has approved the use of this type of health claim statement. All right, next let's take a close-up look at omega-3 fats. Now, omega-3 fats are a type of unsaturated fat, which are our more heart-healthy fats. Now, there are a few different types of omega-3 fats. We have ALA, DHA, and EPA, which are acronyms for much longer scientific names. They are generally referred to using these acronyms, so we'll stick with those for simplicity's sake. Now, ALA, omega-3 fat, is the most common one, and it's found in nuts, especially walnuts, flax seeds, and certain plant oils like soybean and canola. Then we also have DHA and EPA, which are omega-3 fats most commonly found in fatty fish. Now, current scientific research supports the claim that the consumption of omega-3 fats, particularly DHA and EPA, may reduce the risk for heart disease. So we could then also classify omega-3 fats as a functional food component because it provides us with that beneficial effect on our health beyond basic nutrition. In this case, reducing the risk for heart disease, which is similar to what we just talked about with regards to soluble fiber. Now, as I mentioned earlier, omega-3 fats, the DHA and EPA, can be found naturally in fatty fish. And so these would be considered a conventional food because those fats are naturally found in that type of product. And then we can also find omega-3 fats in those modified foods. So an example of this would be omega-3 eggs, where naturally they don't really have much of an omega-3 content, but it can be added to that food to have that functional food component present. Next, let's talk about adaptogenic mushrooms. I'm not sure if anyone has heard of these products recently, but I definitely have seen this as a buzzword popping up all over. And so I definitely wanted to make sure we touched about them today. Now, adaptogens, generally speaking, are generally referred to as natural substances that are thought to help the body adapt to stress. And so foods ranging from herbs to mushrooms can be defined as adaptogenic by some. and they are often used in herbal medicine. Now, adaptogenic mushrooms in particular, such as lion's mane, reishi, and chaga, are some of those popular buzzwords you may have heard, and they certainly have been rising in popularity in recent years. And where I mostly see these types of foods or products popping up are in beverages, particularly coffee alternatives. So you may have seen some products on the market that are marketed as not coffee, but a coffee alternative, since it doesn't actually contain coffee, but essentially it's a drink made from mushrooms that's intended to kind of replace your morning or afternoon coffee. Now, claims surrounding the mushrooms and products that they're made from, some of those claims can range from increased focus to enhanced immunity and even fighting cancer. And there is some research studies examining the link between these types of foods and certain areas of health. However, some of this research is done in animal or cell models, so we can't directly translate those findings to humans. And at this time, there is not a conclusive body of scientific research to support the link between these specific products and those specific areas of health and well-being. All right, and the last functional food component I wanted us to talk through today is probiotics. And if you joined us for our Go With Your Gut class a few weeks back, you may be familiar with some of the information I'm going to share here. Now, probiotics, simply put, are live bacteria that research has shown to produce health benefits when a specific amount is consumed. Now, the health benefits that are provided with probiotics are going to vary depending on what bacteria strain you're looking at. For example, some bacteria strains may be linked to improving digestive symptoms caused by irritable bowel syndrome, while other bacteria strains may be linked to reducing diarrhea associated with antibiotics. So those health benefits really are strain specific. Now, you can find probiotics in both food and supplements, but since we're talking about functional foods today, let's look at a few different food examples. Activia is a popular yogurt on the market, I'm sure many of you have heard of before, and it contains a patented strain of bacteria that research suggests can minimize minor digestive discomfort, such as bloating or gas, if you consume at least these yogurts, 2 of them, twice a day for 2 weeks. Now, Yakult is another probiotic yogurt product that contains a bacteria strain that research suggests can help with constipation. So based on this information for these 2 particular products, we could then classify them as functional foods because, again, they provide that beneficial effect on our health beyond just basic nutrition, and in this case, aiding with GI-related issues. Now, if you weren't able to join our gut health class, but you are interested in learning more about probiotics and gut health in general, just feel free to type a note into the chat box that you're interested in learning a bit more, and I would be happy to include a recording of our gut health class in our recap email that I'll send out following this class. So just send a quick note in the chat box, and I'd be happy to share that. All right, so I did want to end our workshop today with a few words of caution when it comes to some of these new and trendy functional foods out there on the market. Now, I was just only able to touch on a few different foods and components today, but there certainly are many, many more out there, and I'm sure many that will come to the market in the coming months. So in summary, as I'm sure we're all aware, we don't want to believe every marketing claim that we see on a label, because as we discussed earlier, there may or may not be strong scientific research to support some of those health claims you might see on food packages. And I briefly touched on this a bit earlier, but even if there is research on that particular food or component, scientific studies can sometimes be done on cell models or in animals, which might not directly translate to humans. And additionally, sometimes in research, the compound that the scientists may be studying may not be in its whole foods form. So, for example, they might extract a certain food component and provide it to the cell or the animal or even the human in a concentrated amount, sometimes much higher than you or I would ever be able to reasonably consume in a food at a meal or snack. And so this means that some of the potential benefits found might not be achievable for real life, again, in terms of what we can actually eat at a meal or a snack. Now, with all this being said, we are not necessarily for or against any of the products we've pictured or mentioned here today, or that might be elsewhere out there on the market. They may still be a part of a balanced eating pattern, but we might want to put our detective hats on because sometimes the nutrition claims we might be seeing might not be substantiated by a conclusive body of research. So just to kind of quickly review all that we've talked about today, we first started off by sharing that functional foods, they don't have a formal definition, but generally they're referred to as those foods that provide a health benefit beyond just basic nutrition. We reviewed that we can think about functional foods as either conventional foods, meaning it's that whole food in its natural state that naturally contains those health promoting benefits, or it might be a modified food, meaning that a specific functional food component has been added to that food. We reviewed a handful of trending functional food components and talked a little bit through the science or the scientific evidence on each of them. And then we ended with that word of caution to be wary about any broad claims. And if you do have any questions about a food or even a supplement, you can always contact the manufacturer with questions. We have a lot of really great Setting the Trend Straight classes coming up. I've listed out some of those themes here. So if any are of interest and you haven't registered yet, it's not too late to do so. Feel free to head to our website and sign up for some of those upcoming classes. And so I want to thank you all so much for joining into our webinar today. I'd now be happy